So the two big things for me when it came to time management, one was being able to track exactly how much I was doing. For me, I lose track of time very easily. I will think that something happened an hour ago, and it turns out it was 3 days ago. So, being able to see the actual time at the end of the day that I put in really helped. And the other one was actually picking an exam date. And I know you recommended this to me early on, and I thought I wasn't sure if I was going to go to meet it, so I kind of decided to study. It wasn't until I picked that exam date that all of a sudden everything became reality. Hey,
Hi, Alex. How's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. So, Alex, congratulations on passing your FE electrical exam in first attempt. First attempt overall, I believe, and first attempt
First
with me,
attempt overall,
obviously,
yes.
right? So it's been a long journey, right, Alex?
It has. It has. For me, I was out of school for about 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started this program, I know I'd started with the original goal of hoping to knock it out in about 4 months. But life happens, right? I'm very busy with work. So being able to juggle personal life, work life, as well as time to study was very hard. So this ended up becoming, I believe, almost 8 months, somewhere between 8 to 10 months to get it done.
Yeah.
But the program really helped me once I realized what it was going to require to structure myself and be able to get through it. It worked out very well, and fortunately was able to pass on the first try, and I really couldn't thank this program enough for it.
Thanks, Alex. So you are at a senior role at your company, right? So you put in quite a bit of hours and have a lot of responsibility with your full-time job. And coupled with the fact that you also had been out of school for 9+ years, right? So each one of those challenges, how did you cope with them? First, being in a senior role and working more than 9 to 5, essentially, most weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely time management is I would say the biggest struggle out of being able to get through the program or just being able to prepare for this exam in general. The one of my best ways of being able to approach this was at first I just tried to kind of make it part of my schedule, being able to sort of maybe block off times during the days and figure out the best way to manage when I was actually working 9 to 5, and then being able to block it sometimes afterwards. Even at one, I even played around with waking up early in the morning and knocking it out first thing before I started. What actually helped me the most was I sort of started holding myself accountable by creating a almost like clock in, clock out way of managing my time. So I literally just built a really simple Excel sheet that I would record what time I started at and what time I finished at, because I noticed very quickly that when you start studying and then if I was using maybe some breaks during the day, or if I was using time at the end of the night, I would think that I'd put in 4, 5, 6 hours during the day. And then when I started actually tracking it, you realize you only got about an hour in.
Yes.
And I know one of the hardest or one of the biggest goals is to try to average something like 20 hours a week or something, especially when towards the end when I wanted to really clamp it into a certain amount of time before I got the test done. So the two big things for me when it came to time management, one was being able to track exactly how much I was doing. For me, I lose track of time very easily. I will think that something happened an hour ago, and it turns out it was 3 days ago. So, being able to see the actual time at the end of the day that I put in really helped. And the other one was actually picking an exam date. And I know you recommended this to me early on, and I thought I wasn't sure if I was going to go to meet it, so I kind of decided to study. It wasn't until I picked that exam date that all of a sudden everything became reality. It was knowing how many hours I had before the date, being able to set a goal for myself every week, knowing that if I'd missed, the 3 or 4 hours I wanted to do each day, that meant I had to allocate it to another day and make sure I was making up that time. And being able to do that was what really helped actually take on each section and made it feel like I wasn't missing anything by the time I got to where I needed to be.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. In every other interview I've been emphasizing, and whenever I have a one-on-one Zoom call with my students, which by the way I have with every single student, sometimes multiple Zoom calls. Um, I do emphasize this point because when you have a specific deadline to work with, psychologically you find it more real, right? You know that it's going to happen. And then your mind is, at least this is how my mind works. I'm able to give it more attention, more priority, and somehow it gets done. Okay. If I leave it floating, then I am more prone to procrastination. And I think most of us are like that. Regarding your time management, regarding clocking in, clocking out, that's a very good tip as well. One of the things that I recently started doing, funny you mentioned that, because when I'm creating content or when I'm answering student emails or working on any project, I have this false impression that actually I'm doing a lot more than what I'm actually doing. So what I've started doing is I put one of the soundtracks, most often Lord of the Rings, 3 hour long soundtrack on one of the browsers. And I just simply push the play button, and that basically tracks the time. And whenever I leave my seat or have to attend to something else, or whenever I find myself taking a break or getting distracted, doing something else, I just simply put pause. And then at the end of the day, I total how many rounds of those, 3 hour long soundtracks I went through. And that gives me a reality check that you thought you was working 8 hours, but in reality, the amount of work you put in was only maybe 4 or 5 hours. So that's a very good tip. All right, the other challenge, what was your workaround for being out of school 9 years?
Yeah, so I actually, one of the biggest things coming into this, or even just wanting to do the FE and the PE in general, was that one, I recognized what I'd done well and what I did poorly in school.
Okay.
And then what I've learned since I was out of school, right? What were the things that I wish I'd done better based on what I'd started doing, and what I could have improved on. And what I mean by that is that I ended up in the power distribution engineering field out of school. I was designing power lines, which ironically dealt with a little bit more structural at first, which was sort of out of my specialty.
It is, yeah.
But it absolutely involved understanding, understanding circuits, understanding three-phase power, understanding why transformers have kVA values and what's the significance of them. And so there was always a part of me that while I understood what was in front of me, I had lacked that fundamental understanding of the subject that I kind of wish I'd put more time in when I was in school. Okay. That's sort of what I kind of fell in love with this program, was that it really gave me an opportunity to revisit those fundamentals and to really start breaking things down. And I noticed that with the on-demand program, there was a lot of times where during the lectures, you would hit certain notes that it would be something as simple as, I'll give you an example. The most simple version I can think of was during circuit analysis. Ironically, I'd sort of forgotten the concept that when you're analyzing the circuit, you want to put a virtual ground in there, and that's your 0-volt reference to help you determine, the current passing through the resistor there,
right?
Or to help set up your KVL.
A common reference point.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and in my career, I've been describing ground wires to people for years now, explaining that you have to have a common reference point, otherwise you can create dangerous scenarios for workers. But to then suddenly see it as a fundamental part of a circuit or just circuit analysis, which I didn't know when I was in college. That was just something I never was able to piece together. It started making things way more clear, both in my professional life and what I missed when I was there. So even though it's been 9 years since I was in school, it started bringing old lessons back to the front of my memory and then filling the gaps of what I'd forgotten. And that's really, that value was so much for me, where it was all of a sudden I found myself, being able to pause the on-demand, start writing down notes, or even on the live sessions, right? If I was rewatching them, or if I wasn't able to catch the actual live session, I was able to watch it later, being able to stop, write something down, go, oh, okay, he just said something that I've never thought about before. I had no idea that I was supposed to be doing that in the first place. You know, I was always struggling with evidence circuits in college, and then when I started grasping them with these lectures, it suddenly became so much easier. And I almost was upset with myself that I didn't actually take the time to learn it properly when I
Yeah.
was in school. And so I think in a way, I sort of appreciated the fact that even though it's been 9 years since college, the things I've learned and the stuff I've seen that it would benefit to have that fundamental understanding for the purposes of what I do, it helped me bridge the gap that I didn't know was there when I was, when I was younger, when I was basically going through college to get through college. And now all of
Yeah.
a sudden I had a purpose for why I needed to know why these things work the way they do. And so all this, being able to grasp, why you have certain values on a BJT, why, you want to understand regions for MOSFETs, things like that. All of a sudden it just made it so much simpler, and it actually kind of drove me to want to continue learning it more and making sure I now understood it on that fundamental level. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, the span of time does make it a little bit scary at first because you think there's no way I'm going to remember any of this stuff. But I also think it's sort of helped me start piecing things together in a way that I don't think I would have done even back then if I'd known some of what I know now back then.
Right. No, thanks a lot for that detailed input, and I really appreciate your feedback, Alex. And um, you've gone through my live training program as well. Some of the sessions you attended live, apparently some of them, most of them, it seems that you were watching the recordings because of time constraints, but either or, both works. Several times you would have heard me in my live training sessions. I tell my students, guys, the primary goal is to help you pass the exam. Okay, I say the same thing in my FE program, say the same thing in my PE Power program. But there's a secondary reason, okay? The secondary target, secondary goal, secondary mission, which is to help level up your understanding, your competency, your proficiency in fundamentals. So when we're dealing with FE electrical, the fundamentals are really fundamentals. It's as fundamental as knowing that, okay, virtual ground can be placed here or there, what is the purpose of Thevenin, and so on and so forth. Several concepts we've touched upon, both in software. You saw probably me getting super excited even about a topic like engineering economics, where I was bringing in practical applications, like literally what happens with your mortgage, how much interest you can be saving if you just increase the frequency, not the amount, just the frequency of payment, right? And we did those exercises. So I find that going through my academic career as well, the professors, we got to realize in most of the engineering schools, their primary mandate is research, right? Teaching is not how they primarily get evaluated, right? They're meant to deliver, write research papers, write publications, bring in grants and so on and so forth. So very rarely you come across a professor who would basically be coming down to the level of undergrad students and thinking from their standpoint as to what needs to be explained to them. So high school teachers, generally speaking, do a better job because their primary goal is just to teach. And I bet you probably have more favorites or more superstars amongst your teachers that were from your high school or grade school level as compared to your university days, because it's a different ball game. So what I used to do in order to compensate for that is that during my undergrad studies specifically, I would go above and beyond, in depth, and it was not always possible, right? There's too much that's thrown at you in a very short span of time. So sometimes you're able to put in extra time and effort. Other times you just want to make sure that you are afloat and keeping up with assignments and exams and whatnot. But when students come to my program, I try and help them out with this because in the long run, it's very beneficial. So this is just FE Electrical. Wait until you start your P-Power program with me very soon, and you're going to see that more abstract concepts within power systems. You will see me deriving equations from scratch, basically fault analysis. We're going to derive everything from bottom up, We're going to learn everything from first principles. And that's why one of the common feedback I get after my P Power program is a lot of students, when they get the P license, they talk to their current employer, hey, I got the P license now. So what are the bonuses? What are the promotions? What are the increases, salary increase and this and that. Good employers would recognize and compensate for that. Sometimes employers are not able to for whatever reason, and these guys end up making a jump, right? They jump onto different. So that basically means that they have to go through an interview process. And just to quickly close the loop on this, what my students find when they go through the interview process after going through the P-Power program is that most of us, generally speaking, are more scared of technical questions on interviews as compared to behavioral, right? It's almost like you are going to be exposed in terms of deficiencies, what you know, what you don't know. I'm telling you, Alex, my students, they boss around these interviews, right? After having gone through the PE Power program, they get so comfortable with all the basics that some of the students have received offers same day after giving the interviews. And they're like, Wasim, I had no idea, that my fundamentals improved to that level. And that's why you always have to have that mindset. And I can clearly see the level of, commitment and, the excitement that while you were explaining that you actually thoroughly enjoyed the learning process also, right? Not just getting the job done and achieving your result, which obviously is the primary goal. So that is the attitude that I think most of the students should take. It's not easy. It obviously took you 8 months, right? Off and on. You exchanged quite a few emails, but you got the job done. So moving on to the sacrifices that you made, Alex. What were the major sacrifices that you had to make in order to get this done? So you already alluded to the fact that you also played around with the idea of waking up early. So sleep, I guess, had to make way somehow. But if you can think of like a couple of major sacrifices that you or your family had to make along the way.
Oh yeah. So I would say one of the reasons why I think the time it took me to get through it, I could say that at the first part, I don't think I was making. I tried my best to avoid the sacrifices. I think I was trying very hard to just use whatever existing gaps I had,
balance
to
everything
fill in.
out.
Right. And so one thing that I started noticing very quickly was that, especially when I wasn't tracking my time, that I would have days where I'm like, okay, the last 3 days went really well. Maybe tonight, I can use tonight to catch up. I haven't spent time with certain people. I've been avoiding certain things. Let me do that. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 of those days would happen, and I'd be like, oh no, okay, I fell off. I got to get back on. So that last 2 month segment before, when I finally had the exam date, I know we had a conversation. I'm like, I'm going to try to get the rest of this. I think I was about 60% in or 50% in. And I was like, I want to get it done in this time. That was when sacrifices were made. And those sacrifices were along the line of communicating with my family, with those who are close to me, the person I was, my significant other, making sure that they understood that I'm not going to have as much time to spend with you as I normally do. I'd want to, but I need you just to kind of understand that if you could just give me like a month, 2 months, just to let me kind of get through this. I will say I do have an advantage of not having children at the moment, so it does allot me a little more time. Even though my dog loves spending time with me, he understood it too. But it definitely, there were days where I would make sure that, okay, I know I've got to work at this point. I knew there were some work days I had a little bit of an advantage that I knew were slower days. And maybe I could sneak out homework problems on those days. I can't insist enough how much those homework problems help me actually apply that material. So I would definitely use the random hour here and there during days to knock out homework problems. But the big thing was weekends. For that month or 2 months leading up to the test, weekends became study work days. I woke up, I was by 8 a.m. started studying, and 5 p.m. was the end, right? And it would just be wake up, lectures all day. Or maybe that day was I finished all the lectures for the section, or I finished the live training for the day. I think by then your live sessions had already ended, and I was using the ones that had ended to start catching up. but that was the best way for me to really hammer in those last 2 months. Home chores, time with loved ones, being able to take care of certain responsibilities. Eventually, I found a way to balance it. I would allocate my breaks on those weekends. It wouldn't be just 8 hours of me in a seat. There'd be an hour or two of getting up and taking care of whatever responsibility you get done, eating food, whatever was needed. Probably the hardest one to adjust to at first, but then once it kind of became habitual, it became accepted much more easily by those that were close to me, and they started supporting me on it too. They understood that I needed that time. They understood that this is a big test. There's a lot of information for me to cover, and I didn't pull any punches on exactly what I was going to need to get through this, and everyone was very supportive of me.
That's great.
So I was lucky that I had people that understood why I needed that much time. If you have the ability to divvy that up amongst the week, whether maybe work isn't as demanding as mine was at the time, I highly recommend it. It would definitely help. But that I couldn't tell you how much of a difference it made once I guaranteed those days to myself. And then even when time came close to test time, I took some days off from work. I'm not gonna admit, I'm not gonna say that it's not fun giving up your PTO to study. Sometimes it was a little bitter, but I mean, I'm now here. I passed on the first try. I felt confident when I was taking the test. Even when the test ended, and I had a couple sections that I was like, ooh, I wish I could have done a little bit better there. I still walked away going, you know what? I'm still feeling like this is gonna go well. I remember feeling like I crushed at least the first half. I walked away from the first half going like, yeah, I got that one. And then the set, and it really came down to the time that was allocated to it. And so, to kind of bring it back home, I have to insist that, it's tough to give up the weekends, but it really made the difference. Just being able to turn those into like another work day, but it's studying. And that way you don't have, as long as you're open about the time you need and you've got your responsibilities taken care of, you'll be able to minimize your distractions. You'll be able to minimize the time you have to walk away from the studying, and then do what you can during the week to still keep, that 2 hours if you can. 2 to 4 hours was the kind of the sweet spot for me. If I tried to shoot for more than 4, I was giving up too many other things that maybe I was falling behind on work, or I noticed that I wasn't maybe taking in the information properly because I felt like I was trying to jam too much in at once. So that seemed to work perfectly for me, was being able to kind of give somewhere between 2 to 4 hours during the week along with my work, and then weekends fully focused on studying. And then as the time got closer, being able to maybe take off a few days here and there just to get that little bit of extra practice in, right? Taking those practices, doing the homework, that kind of stuff.
That's great. And one last question for you, Alex. So you've been studying off and on for 8 months, and in the last few months with quite a bit of intensity. Why are you diving right into PE Power?
I mean, things are fresh right now. It makes total sense to kind of keep it going. What's funny is, and I don't know if this happens to other people, after that first week after the exam, I found myself going like, I kept thinking, okay, now I'm supposed to sit down and keep studying. I was ready to keep studying things, or to keep taking.
You start missing it. Yes.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It happens.
Maybe I'd gotten used to it. I don't know what it was.
I know several students have told me this, that they actually miss the routine of studying. And that is one of the reasons why they dive into PE Power. And in fact, I do recommend students to consider, if your state allows, and in your case, you have more than 9 years of experience already, so not an issue at all. And I think in the state of Florida where you are, it's they've decoupled anyways. So I think you're making the right decision. Once again, thanks a lot for your time, Alex. And I look forward to seeing you in my PE Power program and helping you through the final part of the journey. As I mentioned, you're going to love PE Power even more than FE Electrical. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be directly applicable to what you do at work, and hopefully will improve your competency, understanding, knowledge of overall power systems.
Now looking forward to it.